About a year ago, I decided to build a half-scale Jeep for my grandchildren. I have two granddaughters, and I thought it would be fun for them to run around in the woods behind the house with it. This is what I came up with. I wanted something that my 8 and 5-year-old granddaughters could easily drive on the wooded trails out behind the house. It was a fun and interesting build, and I thought I would share it. I started with the premise that I'm going to use an electric drivetrain, small electric motor and batteries. It's not going very far from the house, and it doesn't have to go very fast. I started out by getting the rough size and scale of the military Jeep from the World War II era. I found these dimensional drawings online. There are many more out there to choose from, but I will put the links for these two in my description. I decided to make it half scale lengthwise, but half scale for the width of the body would only be 28 inches. I didn't think that 28 inches would be stable enough, so I went with a body width of 36 inches. That also made it more comfortable for them both to ride at the same time. I decided to build a plywood body on a square steel tube frame. The plywood body would be relatively easy to work with. The steel frame would add strength and give me a solid attachment points for the driveline and the steering system. This picture is farther in the build, but I wanted to get a good shot of what the bottom looked like. The bottom is your starting point, of course. You just cut it out to fit, and everything else goes on top of it. Here's the floor and some of the rear bulkheads going together. I put the chalk line down the middle, and it gave me a reference point for all my measurements after that. You can't see it here, but on the bottom I have a 2x3 screwed to the plywood front to back. It kept the thing straight while I was working it. Sideways isn't too bad because once you start putting the bulkheads in, it keeps it flat side to side. I also used corner blocks on the inside corners. It gives a much better purchase for the screws and a much stronger corner. Here you can get an idea of the rear structure. Rear of the box, rear sides, and wheel well fitment behind the center bulkhead show up pretty well here. Boxing these sections really stiffens the structure. The motor and the batteries will end up in the section between the wheel wells. This shows the assembly of the side panels forward of where the body tapers toward the front end. I just scaled the drawings for the measurements that I used for the notches in the side, where the taper began, all that kind of thing. I'm looking for something that looks like a Jeep, not necessarily exactly like a Jeep. Here you can see the tops of the front fenders going on. It's really a genius way of doing things because it's a series of boxes. It stiffens the thing well. This is simply a front view of the same thing. The two things you can see here, the one is that 2x4 or 2x whatever in the front crosswise is simply there screwed in order to keep the base flat while I work on the front. And when I put the front grill on, that'll come off. Second thing is now you can see the 2x3 that I had in the bottom front to back to stiffen while I was working the thing. The next two slides are just a basic idea of how the grill will fit. I haven't done any details on them yet. Basically just checking for scale, making sure it fits and looks right, then I'll fasten it in place temporarily. This will give you a better view and a better idea of how the front wheel wells, fender tops, sides, and grill will go together. Now, once again, if you put them all together, it just stiffens the whole thing up. This is a nice side view. It shows off the proportions, and I think they turned out pretty well. It also shows the rear of the front fender. I just beveled the top edge of it to go against the top and then put an angle against the body to support the thing down below. The last piece on each side is the filler between the firewall area up to the grill. It sits on top of the fender. Here's a shot of the front grill with the air slots cut in. This shows the dashboard going into place. This is one of those places where I tell you to do something differently. I plan to put this key switch, the other switches, the electrical gauge, and the charging port on a flat stainless steel section to the dashboard. The opening I cut in the dashboard to facilitate this piece of metal with the switches and gauges on it ended up being much too large vertically. Because I wanted the dashboard to add some structure to the body, I decided to put a stainless steel angle on the bottom back side of the dash. If the opening for the instrument panel was shorter, it wouldn't be a problem. The bottom angle wouldn't be needed. The headlights I had ordered finally came, so I was able to cut the holes in the grill to make them fit. I sourced them from a scooter company. The size was just about to the scale that I'd liked, and they worked out very well. Here you can also see the cross bracing between the grill and the dash. It also gives me a place to mount the fascia and the hood. To keep things simple, at the vertical joints at the rear and at the taper, I simply put stainless steel plates, one with an angle and the other one a radius around the back, and screwed them in place. Very simple. I just filled in the corners and the edges with caulking when I got finished, and it actually turned out pretty well. Gave me the effect I'm looking for with a lot of difficulty. The seating area is made of 3 pieces. The 2 that go over the wheel wells are fixed in place. The center section is hinged on the front and opens so that you can get to the motor, batteries, and wiring. That pretty much completes the plywood body. In part 2, we'll work on the frame. Thanks for watching this far.